It was the end of August, and that conversation in the Antuni family came up spontaneously, as if the husband hadn't even considered such a thing until then. But of course that wasn't quite how it was. Ikaro looked at Milena from top to bottom. She, in turn, stared in silence at the shiny, cold, metal key in her husband's hand. A country house. A divorce. What are you talking about? The husband smiled. Which country house? At Alvaro's, obviously. Or do I have some other boss? Milena shuddered. Castro. That surname echoed in her mind like a scratched record. Yes, Alvaro Castro. Ikaro's boss, who had been in a coma for 2 months after an accident. But why should I live there? Milena whispered, feeling a knot tighten in her throat. Ikaro finally looked away from the papers and stared at his wife. In his eyes there was neither love nor regret, only fatigue, caused by genuine irritation. I need time to organize everything. I want to move on with my life with someone else. Well, so it's better for you to go there. You'll be in peace, in the quiet of the countryside, and think about what to do next. And what exactly am I supposed to think about? Think about how my world fell apart, and precisely at your boss's country house. Milena asked with difficulty. Ikaro frowned, making it clear he was already fed up with her questions. This is the simplest solution. Or did you really think I would rent you a penthouse in the city center? In the city center. The house is empty anyway. Someone looks after it, of course, but no one lives there regularly. It's the perfect place for us to stay apart and avoid headaches before the divorce. So you've already decided everything? Milena asked with bitterness. Is it because I wasn't able to give you children that... But that's not my fault. Ikaro deliberately ignored her words. Here is the key. Take it. There's food, bedding, and everything necessary there. When I can, I'll transfer some money to your card. Not much, of course, but enough to buy bread at least. The rest, well, you're on your own. They say there's a school in the area. You can try for a job there and keep teaching children to scrape the violin. Milena took the key. The cold metal burned her palm, and she felt broken, empty. Her life had shattered into pieces, and she had no idea how to put them back together. Ikaro spoke to her in a mocking tone, as if she were a disgraced music teacher reduced to the level of a street performer in an underground tunnel. And when do I need to leave? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The sooner, the better. Even better. Ikara went back to focusing on his papers, preferably today, at the latest, by tomorrow. And one more thing. I don't think I need to tell you that after the divorce you won't get anything. So I'm warning you in advance, no courts or lawyers, no. Without answering, Milena turned and left the office, struggling not to break down in tears right there. And that was it. The end. No explanations, no goodbyes, no tears exchanged, just a key in her hand, a country house, and her husband's indifferent gaze. She packed her bags quickly, barely able to see with her eyes full of water. On the bus, the bumps on the road didn't matter much to her. Sitting by the window, Milena watched the gray landscape of late summer pass before her eyes. The rain, which had already started in the city, was now pouring down, blurring the colors and making the world around her even gloomier. Maybe it was the overcast weather, or maybe it was the effect of an old injury, but her head began to throb, and then it happened. Not that it was the worst of consequences, but in moments like these, Milena often lost her hearing, which always worried her, especially considering she was a music teacher. Luckily, the episodes of deafness never lasted long. After 5-10 minutes, everything returned to normal, but the episodes were getting longer and longer and longer. What if one day her hearing disappeared forever? The thought made Milena shiver. She couldn't imagine her life without music. The interior of the bus was permeated with the smell of damp clothes, gasoline, and cheap food. Most of the passengers were elderly women, their faces marked by time. One of them, with a kind expression and wrinkles as deep as caverns, turned to Malina. "Where are you going, my dear, my dear? In weather like this?" Malina was startled by the unexpected question. "To a country house," she murmured, avoiding looking into the curious woman's eyes. "It must be far, right? Our bus goes as far as Recanto das Pedras, a dead-end place." "Yes, far," Malina replied, turning her face to the window. All she wanted was for that nightmare to end as quickly as possible. Ikaro's plan was simple. She had nowhere to go, and no one she could turn to. Why? At the school where she worked, she had never formed deep bonds with her colleagues. Her family lived far away and led a modest life, cramped, in a small, poorly maintained apartment. Outside the window, the landscape became increasingly desolate. Endless fields, trees dried up and abandoned by time, and the bus rattled ever more violently. Malina felt as if she were being ripped from civilization and cast to the margins of life. Finally, the vehicle stopped before a crooked, rusty bus stop sign where the name of the village, Recanto das Pedras, was barely legible. She stepped off the bus with difficulty, and an icy wind cut through her body like blades. The driver, stone-faced, gave her a fleeting glance. The man, his face reddened by the wind, dropped her suitcase on the asphalt. "It's on foot from here," he muttered. "I only bring people this far. It's my route." The bus engine roared loudly before disappearing around the bend, leaving Malina alone on the road under the pouring rain. Around her, only a desolate landscape and a growing tightness in her chest. She looked around. No shelter in sight. She sighed, grabbed her suitcase, and began to walk. The rain didn't let up, soaking her clothes to the bone. Her shoes made a squelching sound with every step on the muddy road. She felt her body weakening and despair growing inside her. She stopped a few times to catch her breath, but there wasn't a single place to take cover, only the void. Until, in the distance, the first signs of civilization appeared: crooked fences, overgrown gardens, and low, wooden houses. Her heart raced. Malina wanted to believe that this place could be a refuge, a space to heal her wounds and find peace. But something inside her whispered that it wouldn't be that simple. The Castro country house was a large, two-story structure surrounded by a fence, worn down by time. The gates were locked with a rusty padlock. She had to struggle with the key for a good while before finally managing to unlock it. The yard was neglected, taken over by tall weeds. Tree branches hung down to the ground, reinforcing the sense of abandonment and melancholy. Inside the house, the smell of dampness permeated the air. Everything was covered in white sheets, and the floor bore a thick layer of dust. Malina ran her hand along the wall until she found a light switch. A weak yellowish glow illuminated the room. The space was simple, modest, with no modern amenities. On the walls, old photographs; on the shelves, dusty books. In the corner of the room, a piano. Everything there suggested that, one day, this house was a happy family's home. In one of the rooms, there was even a computer covered in plastic, probably to preserve it from time. Malina walked through the house, peering into every room. In each one, the same thing: dust, dampness, abandonment. Exhausted and soaked, she decided the first thing to do was take a hot shower. To her surprise, the bathroom was clean and well-kept, as if someone had tidied it recently. The water tank was full, and the heater worked perfectly. Malina stood under the hot water, letting the drops wash away not just the dirt and fatigue, but also some of her anguish. For a moment, it felt like her pain was draining away with the water. After her shower, she put on dry clothes and went out to the porch. The rain had stopped. Through the clouds, the sun emerged, spilling its golden light over the landscape, warming the world around. Malina sat in an old chair and closed her eyes. The tranquility of the place, broken only by the chirping of birds and the whispering of leaves in the wind, brought a sense of peace. There, away from everything, it was as if she were in another universe, a place where there was no pain or disappointment. Of course, Melina knew it was just an illusion, Alu. Her problems hadn't disappeared, they were just being kept at bay for a brief moment, She still needed to decide what to do next, how to rebuild her life after the divorce, But now, in that moment, all she wanted was to enjoy the solitude, feeling free from the past and open to the future. The night was restless, she tossed and turned in the narrow bed like a bird trapped in a cage. In her dreams, Icaro was chasing her. His eyes, cold and merciless, stared at her without saying a word. At dawn, Melina awoke with a heavy head and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. The new day brought with it a gray sky and a silence heavy with melancholy. The decision to resign came suddenly, She picked up the phone and dialed the school principal's number. Hello? A surprised voice sounded on the other end of the line. Melina, is that you? Has something happened? Good morning, Professor Viridiana. Melina's voice trembled, but she forced herself to sound firm. Mom, I am resigning. The silence on the line was absolute. It seemed even the crickets had gone silent, attentive to the conversation. Melina, what are you saying? Teacher Viridiana finally asked her, struggling to find the right words. Kids. What happened? Everything is fine, Melina lied. I simply cannot go on anymore. I decided to start a new life. But what about the children? You love them so much, don't you? I know. Melina's voice wavered. But I can't do anything else. I'll stop by in the coming days to sign my resignation. I'm sorry, but I have no other choice. Without waiting for an answer, she hung up the phone. Tears streamed down her face in torrents. Melina had just destroyed her career. She abandoned a long-held dream, yet felt a strange relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She wiped her face and went out to the yard. She needed to find something to occupy her mind, anything to keep her from going mad with the emptiness of loneliness. Her gaze fell upon the abandoned garden, determined she would tend to the soil. After much effort, she found an old rusty hoe in the shed. Melina began to pull out the weeds. The weeds clung to the soil tightly as if they didn't want to give up their place in the sun. Each one of them now seemed to Melina a symbol of her past life, a life she was ruthlessly pulling up by the root. That soon, she became so absorbed in the work that she lost track of time. The sun was scorching, and sweat ran down her face, but she didn't care. Working was a way to silence the pain, to avoid thinking, to not feel. Suddenly, her gaze fixed on a spot in the ground just a few meters away. The grass was overturned in some places as if someone had disturbed it recently. Melina moved closer to get a better look. Indeed, the earth had been stirred, as if someone had been digging there looking for something. Curiosity grew within her. Who could have been digging there, and what were they trying to find? Determined to solve the mystery, Melina dropped the hoe and grabbed a shovel, starting to dig. The blade sank into the hardened earth and she pushed forward, driven by the desire to discover the truth about that place. Finally, under an old apple tree, whose roots intertwined in an intricate pattern, her shovel struck something solid. With effort, she began to dig with her hands, clearing away the dirt little by little. A few minutes later, she pulled out a small metal chest. Despite being buried, it did not look old. On the contrary, it was made of stainless steel and was in great condition. On the lid, a small but sturdy padlock. Obviously, the key was not nearby. Melina's heart raced. What could be inside? What secret did that chest hide? She was about to take it inside the house to try and open it when a soft voice sounded behind her. What did you find there, my dear? Melina shuddered and turned around abruptly. On the other side of the neighbor's fence, an elderly gentleman was watching Melina. He wore a faded shirt and tall rubber boots. In his hands, he held a jar of honey. His wrinkled face radiated kindness and serenity. "Oh, I was just clearing the grass," murmured Milena, trying to hide the chest behind her. "Alvaro Castro always loved this garden," the stranger commented. "So do you know the owner of the house?" "Of course I do. My name is Nicolau. I look after some beehives nearby," the man replied naturally. "And are you the new owner of the property, eh?" "You could say that," Milena answered vaguely. "Well then, welcome to Recanto das Pedras," said Nicolau with a kind smile. "It's a quiet, peaceful place here. Who knows, maybe you'll like it too." "Thank you," Milena replied, forcing a smile. The neighbor's gaze rested on the object she was still trying to hide. "And what do you have there?" he asked, gesturing with a slight tilt of his head. "Oh, nothing much. I just found it curious," Milena deflected. "May I see it?" Milena hesitated for a moment, but soon decided there was no reason to hide anything. She held the chest over the fence. Nicolau examined the object closely, turning it from side to side. "It is, without a doubt, a well-made piece," he murmured. "The lock isn't the easiest, but I think we can open it. Milena's heart raced. "Really? Can you try?" "Of course. I'd be happy to help. I would appreciate it very much." "In that case, come to my house," said Nicolau. "I have tea and fresh honey. I just harvested it." Milena accepted without hesitation. To tell the truth, she was overcome with curiosity. What could be hidden in that chest? Besides, there was something comforting in the idea that even in this unknown place someone was willing to lend a hand. Shortly after, they were already sitting at the table in Nicolau's cozy kitchen. On the table, a kettle steamed next to cups and a jar of golden, fragrant honey. "Well, shall we get to work?" asked Nicolau, picking up pliers and a screwdriver from his toolbox. With dexterity, the old beekeeper handled the tools like a true master, his movements precise and agile. Milena watched, holding her breath. Finally, the lock gave way and opened with a faint click. Anxious, Milena leaned in to look inside the chest. Inside were hermetically sealed floppy disks and CDs containing information. They looked old, likely from the era when computers were large and clumsy. "What is this?" Milena asked. Surprised? "I don't know," replied Nicolau, shrugging his shoulders. "The owner of the house was always a strange man. They could be documents or anything else." Milena picked up one of the floppy disks. She felt deep in her heart that there was something important kept there, something that could change everything. "Do you know exactly what he worked with?" she asked. "Who can say?" replied the beekeeper. "They said he was a businessman, involved in deals in the capital, but suddenly he came here, isolated himself in this house, and now, after the accident, he's in a coma." Milena became thoughtful. What could be stored on those floppy disks? What secret did that house hide? A chill ran through her body, and she realized that she had inadvertently gotten involved in a dangerous game, a game whose rules she didn't know. After all, no one would hide something in the garden unless it was truly valuable or compromising. Nicolau called her, interrupting the kind neighbor. "Thank you so much for the help and the tea, but it's time for me to go." "Won't you stay a little longer?" insisted Nicolau. "Let's have another tea and talk." "Thank you, but I really need to go," Milena replied determinedly. "But I'll come back another time." She said goodbye quickly, took the chest, and returned home. Her mind was teeming with hundreds of thoughts. She needed to find out what was going on there. She needed to understand what was stored on those old floppy disks. Upon arriving, she locked the door and sat at the table, placing the discovery right in front of her. Suddenly, Recanto das Pedras no longer seemed like a place forgotten in time. Now, it was the center of a mystery that was up to her to unravel. Night fell over the village and enveloping everything in darkness and silence, but inside the house a light remained on. The furniture covered in white sheets looked like a collection of ghosts from the past. Mentally, Milena apologized to the owner of the house before entering Alvaro Castro's office. On the large desk rested an old computer. Milena settled into the chair, turned on the monitor, and with a racing heart inserted the first floppy disk into the drive. The screen flickered while loading, but instead of the files she expected, a window appeared, asking for a password. Just what I needed, Milena whispered, biting her lip hard. She tried a few simple combinations, but without success. Maybe something related to Castro, date of birth, wife's name, dog's name. But she knew nothing of that. Any attempt of hers was nothing more than a naive guess. Suddenly, a childhood memory surfaced in her mind. She saw herself small again, a little girl standing in front of an orphanage window. It was raining outside. Pressing her face against the glass, she dreamed of her mother. "I have something special for you," said a voice behind her. Milena turned and saw teacher Sylvia holding a doll in her hands. An ordinary doll, nothing special, but to the little girl it seemed like a true treasure. "Here, it's yours," said Sylvia, handing her the toy. "Give her whatever name you want." Milena took the gift and pressed it against her chest. At that moment, she felt a deep connection with the doll and, whispering softly, chose a name. Lola. That was the name Milena chose for her doll, who soon became her best friend. She told her all her secrets, shared her dreams, and on quiet nights, when everyone was already asleep, she would whisper to Lola how much she wished to be adopted to find a real family. But reality was cruel. Milena grew up in an orphanage where every day looked like the one before. The food was always the same. The taunting from the other children. All of that left scars on her soul. The most painful thing, however, was knowing she wasn't like the other girls. Due to a hormonal issue, she was smaller than her peers of the same age and, for that, was always a target for mockery. They called her Shorty, Thumbelina. "Milena, the doctor wants to see you," said Aunt Sylvia one morning. Her heart raced. She never liked doctors. The injections were painful, the conversations confusing. In the office, a tall woman dressed in white was waiting for her. "Hello, Milena," the doctor said with a smile. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," whispered the tiny girl. "We want you to stay at the hospital for a while," the doctor continued. "Yup, there you will undergo a special treatment that will help you grow." Milena began to cry. She didn't want to go to the hospital. It was scary and lonely there. "Don't cry," said the doctor, stroking her hair. This is for your own good." The treatment was long and painful. Every day, she underwent procedures that left her body sore. But Milena endured it all, dreaming of the day she would be tall and beautiful like the other girls. One day, after she had finished the treatment, strangers appeared at the orphanage, a man and a woman. They spoke with the director for a long time, then approached her. "Hello," the woman said with a gentle smile. "My name is Fernanda, and this is my husband Icaro. We want to be your parents." Milena couldn't believe what she was hearing. Had her dream finally become reality? The woman gently took her hand. "Tell me, would you like to live with us?" the woman asked. Milena nodded, unable to say a single word. She knew, from the older orphans, that when someone wanted to adopt you, it was best to be quiet as a mouse so as not to scare away luck, or, as they said at the orphanage, not to ruin everything. And so, Milena gained a family. She loved Selena and Leocio with all her heart. The couple, who had no children, were kind and affectionate and soon became her parents in every way. But the past was slow to release its grip on her. Memories of the orphanage visited her constantly in her dreams. She feared that one day her parents would change their minds and send her back. For a moment, the memories dissipated. Milena opened her eyes, returning to reality. The password. What if she tried something linked to her past? Moved by emotion, she typed her adoptive mother's name, Selena. Incorrect password. She then tried the name of her childhood doll, Lola. Nothing. Desperate, she closed her eyes and tried to recall the most significant moments of her childhood. That was when a number popped into her mind. 38. The hospital room number, where she went through the growth hormone treatment. Milena quickly typed the digits and pressed enter. No result. It was naive to think something like that could work. Milena sighed. Then, lost in thought, she ran her fingers over the keyboard as if playing piano keys. And then, something unexpected happened. The screen glowed in an intense blue hue, flickered twice, and suddenly the image changed. Milena held her breath. Before her appeared a list of files. She didn't know what awaited her, but she felt she was on the right track. She opened the first file. It was a text document, but it contained no understandable words, only jumbled symbols and numbers. She tried to decipher the content, but it was useless. What could this be? She whispered, feeling frustration taking over once again. Without giving up, she opened the second file. This time, it was a photograph. In the image, there was a man. It was not Alvaro Castro. His face was stern, his features hard, his gaze piercing and unsettling. Milena did not know that man, but for some reason he seemed familiar to her. She had seen him before. But where? Suddenly another memory surfaced in her mind. She was in college majoring in music education. She loved music with all her heart and dreamed of being a teacher, spreading joy to children through art. It was at a university party that she met Icaro. He was handsome, confident, and in his final year of economics. From the first moment, Milena felt a strong attraction to him, and to her happiness it was mutual. Icaro knew how to win her over. He gave her flowers, took her to the movies, the theater, and even wrote poetry for her. It didn't take long for Milena to fall madly in love. 6 months later, they were married in a simple ceremony. She was radiant. There it was, finally, true love. But married life was not as sweet as she had imagined. To her surprise, in a few months Icaro changed. He became a selfish and demanding husband, who never took her opinion into account and showed no interest in her dreams and passions. Then came the news of the pregnancy. For a brief moment, she felt hope, but the happiness was short-lived. Icaro suggested they spend a weekend on the river riding in a rented boat. Milena agreed. The day was beautiful. The sun was shining bright, and the river seemed calm. Icaro sped up the boat without worrying about safety warnings. Suddenly, a speedboat appeared ahead. He didn't have time to react. The boat collided violently with the side of the vessel, which was several times larger than theirs. Milena lost consciousness. Everything that happened afterward, she saw as if she were outside herself, observing from afar, as if watching her own inert body lying in an ICU bed. White walls, IVs, and monitors, and an oxygen tube inserted. In her nose and mouth, anonymous figures dressed in blue, leaning over her, muffled by masks and the distance. Mitisum. Head trauma complications, loss of the baby. Milena tried to breathe, but the air seemed stuck in her throat. The pain was not physical, but overwhelming, suffocating. She clenched her hands tightly, nails digging into her skin, and then, amidst the silence surrounding her, she realized her hearing was failing. Auditory nerve damage, partial hearing loss, risk of progression. The doctors' voices echoed around her as they tried to save her. When Milena finally woke up, she let out a sigh of relief, believing that it had all just been a nightmare. But upon opening her eyes, she realized with bitter disappointment that she was still in the ICU. Ikaro was sitting next to the bed. He was crying in silence, or perhaps just rubbing his eyes, faking tears. Now, it didn't really matter anymore. "Milena, forgive me," he said, his voice weak. "It was all my fault," Ikaro murmured. "What happened?" Milena asked, feeling a throbbing pain in her head. "You suffered a serious injury," replied her husband. "You spent almost a month in a coma and also lost the baby, maybe." Milena closed her eyes. Tears streamed silently down her face. After the accident, her life was never the same again. She became more withdrawn, irritable. Furthermore, headaches and dizziness began to torment her constantly. It was also from that moment on that her hearing began to fail from time to time, as if someone pressed a button in her head and turned off the sound of the world around her. Meanwhile, Ikaro also began to change. Little by little, he started drifting away. He no longer showed affection or concern. He spent more and more time at work. On weekends, he went out with friends as if nothing had happened. Milena felt her marriage crumbling before her eyes, but the fear of being alone kept her from taking any action. Then, suddenly came the final blow. The divorce papers. As if she were a disposable object, Ikaro sent them to the country house of a man she didn't even know. Tears welled up in her eyes. Once again, Milena felt small, abandoned, and unwanted. With a sigh, she minimized the window on the computer and leaned back in her chair. The memories returned with full force like a flood, about to sweep her away. Milena sat there for a long time without realizing that dusk was turning into night. The wind howled outside, beating against the windows. The house plunged into darkness, becoming even colder and more uncomfortable. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Milena shuddered at the unexpected sound. Who could it be? Cautiously, she approached and opened the door just enough to peek through. Outside was Nicolau. "Milena, is everything okay?" asked the old beekeeper, his voice heavy with concern. "I saw the house was dark and decided to check." "Everything is fine, Nicolau," she replied, trying to hide the tension in her voice. "I was just distracted and forgot to turn on the lights. Want some help lighting the fireplace?" he offered. The nights can get cold, even at the end of summer. The house cools down quickly, and sometimes it's good to warm it up a bit. "Thanks, but I can handle it," Milena replied. "As you wish. I just wanted to help," Nicolau said, shrugging. "But if you need anything, I'm nearby." He turned to leave, but suddenly stopped and added, "Oh, I almost forgot. I saw something strange the other day." "What?" Milena frowned. A man and a little girl, must have been about 8 years old. "What about them?" "They were on Castro's land, digging in the dirt with small shovels. They seemed to be looking for something." "Did you talk to them?" "Yes. I asked what they were doing, but they said they were digging for worms to fish. They said the soil here was good for that." "Lies," grumbled Nicolau. "I've lived long enough to know where people really go to prepare for fishing." Milena thanked him again for his help, then closed the door and leaned against it, feeling exhausted and empty. She took a deep breath and went back to the computer. She opened the file with the man's photo again and carefully analyzed his face. And then, a memory emerged like a flash. It was Ikaro's father. She had only seen him a few times at the wedding and later in the ICU after the boat accident. But what was Horacio doing in Alvaro Castro's archives? What was the connection between them? Milena felt a puzzle forming in her mind, and her intuition told her she was facing something much bigger than she imagined. She always thought Horacio was a strange figure. His gaze was cold, almost hostile. His expression, always arrogant, well reflected his status as a rich and powerful businessman. His mother-in-law, on the other hand, was the opposite. Viridiana was a calm, reserved woman who loved to cook and never got involved in her husband's or son's business. Melina wondered if Viridiana knew what her husband was plotting. Probably not. In that family, it was the men who made all the decisions, the father, and the son, and no one else. When she visited the home of her husband Icaro's parents, Melina never felt at ease. The only thing that made those visits bearable was the company of Viridiana, her mother-in-law. Suddenly, she heard a noise at the window, a soft, insistent tapping. Turning around, she saw a girl of about 8 years old, eyes wide and scared, hair disheveled. Melina opened the window slightly. "Auntie, please, help me," the girl whispered, sobbing through her tears. "What happened?" asked Melina, alarmed to see the girl's condition. "My father went out to the cemetery and didn't come back." Melina frowned. "Who is your father?" "Tadeu. He's a fisherman." The girl sniffled, trying to hold back her tears. "He said he was going to meet a man." "What man?" Melina leaned in to hear her better. I don't really remember. I think his name was Icaro or Alvaro." The girl replied hesitantly. "Daddy said it was a secret." Melina felt a chill run up her spine. Fine. "What else did he say?" "After he talked to that man, Daddy started looking for something here in your house." "Looking for what?" "Something hidden. He said if he found it, the man would give him a lot of money and we couldn't tell anyone." The girl cried even more, but we didn't find anything. She wiped her eyes with trembling hands. "And tonight, Daddy went to the cemetery to meet this man again, but he didn't return." Her voice became almost a whisper. "I'm scared. I can't go there alone." A shiver ran down Melina's spine. Cemetery. Something about it seemed wrong. What if it was a trap? But why? What would be the point of that? "Oh, all right," said Melina, trying to keep her voice calm. "What is your name?" "Aurora. But you can call me Polly." "Don't cry, Polly. I will go with you. My name is Melina." She grabbed a flashlight that was on the windowsill and left the house. The night air was freezing, enveloping them. Together, they headed toward the cemetery, which was on the outskirts of the village. The road seemed endless. The trees, twisted by the darkness, cast threatening shadows. Melina tried to hide her fear, but her heart was pounding in her chest. "It's this way," whispered Aurora, pointing to a narrow path that led inside the cemetery. The flashlight beam illuminated ancient tombstones, some leaning, ready to collapse. The only thing that broke the absolute silence was the distant hoot of an owl. Melina tried to ignore the graves around them, but the shadows seemed to follow them with every step. Then, finally, they reached a freshly dug grave, a small mound of dirt, no cross, no tombstone, no name. There was no plaque, no wreath of flowers, no sign of any tribute. That grave, what was it doing there? The silence was oppressive, weighing on Melina's shoulders. But she didn't back down. She pointed the flashlight at the mound of earth, thoughtful. It was then that she heard a faint moan coming from beneath the ground. She and Aurora looked at each other, frozen in terror. "Daddy!" the girl shouted, running toward the grave. Melina dropped the flashlight on the ground and began to dig desperately with her hands. Her instinct told her that the disappearance of the girl's father was directly linked to that white grave. The cold dirt dug under her fingernails, but she felt no pain. The moans grew louder. There, soon the coffin lid began to appear. Luckily, the grave was shallow. If it had been deeper, the weight of the earth would have crushed whoever was inside. The coffin was simple, made of rustic boards. With effort, Melina and Aurora managed to push the lid aside. Inside was a young man. His face was covered in blood, and a deep wound marked his temple. He was alive, but he had already lost consciousness. "Daddy!" Aurora shouted, Desperate, Aurora threw herself over her father. Desperate. Help me, Malena asked, struggling to lift Tadeo Yaru. We need to get him out of here. With great effort. After almost 10 minutes struggling against the weight of the unconscious man, they finally managed to pull him out of the coffin. Malena took a deep breath, trying to catch her breath. We need to take him home. Where do you live? Near the river, Aurora replied. It's not far. I can show the way. Dragging Tadeu along the dirt road, Malena and the fisherman's daughter took almost half an hour until they reached a small house by the river, Baber. The man kept moaning softly but did not regain consciousness. Malena found a cloth and began to wipe the blood from his face. We need to stop the wound, she said. Do you have bandages or dressings? Aurora ran to the cupboard, bringing a small first aid kit. Carefully, Malena disinfected the cut and bandaged Tadeo's head. Is my father going to live? Asked Aurora, looking at her with eyes filled with tears. I think so, Malena replied, trying to sound confident. He just needs to rest. She sat beside the unconscious man, watching his heavy breathing. Aurora huddled against her, shivering. The chest, the floppy disks, the unknown man. Everything was somehow linked to Alvaro Castro, who had been in a coma for over a month after the accident. I will find out what is happening. Malena looked into Aurora's eyes as if to promise her that. Now, let's light the fireplace, she said. Your father needs warmth. He is very weak. Soon the silence in the fisherman's house was filled only by the soft crackling of wood burning in the stove and Tadeo's uneven breathing. Malena felt that her life, so quiet and predictable until the day before, was changing before her eyes. She looked at Aurora, who had fallen asleep in her lap. The little face, still dirty with tears and dust, looked so helpless. Gently, Malena stroked the girl's hair and made a promise to herself. No one would hurt her. She sat for a few more minutes, then picked up the girl and carried her to the room, covering her with care. Tadeu, although still unconscious, was breathing more steadily, like someone simply sleeping to regain his strength. Malena leaned down and kissed Aurora's forehead before leaving the room in silence. It was time to go home and try to better understand those floppy disks found in the hideout. As she left, a gust of biting wind enveloped her. The sound of the wind wailed like a wounded animal, tearing leaves from the trees with fury. Malena shivered from the cold, pulled an old blanket over her shoulders and sat down at the computer. Her heart was still beating irregularly after the nightmare experienced at the cemetery. Disturbing thoughts swirled in her mind. Who could have done something so cruel to Tadeu? And what was the connection of that house to all of this? And its mysterious owner? Meanwhile, the computer screen displayed the list of files again. Most of them seemed like a meaningless jumble of numbers and letters, but one caught her attention by its name, Diary. Without hesitation, Malena clicked on the file, and before her eyes appeared Alvaro Castro's notes made over several years. She began to read, diving into the thoughts and memories of a stranger. The first entries were boring reports of business meetings, plans for the future, reflections on the company. But as she progressed through the text, the notes became more personal, more emotional. June 2, 1990, I met a wonderful woman named Laura. She works as a nurse at the first clinic. Laura is sweet and kind. Today she told me about work and how she's adapting to the new job. I feel like I'm falling in love. I think she feels something for me too. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. It feels like I've found a soulmate. November 15, 1991. Laura resigned from the clinic. She said she wants to change her life and start from scratch. She has a long trip abroad. It's sad to lose her, but I understand her decision. Who would wait for a fiancé for a year or more? No one. I wish her luck. After this entry, there was a long silence in the diary. Laura was never mentioned again. For a while, the notes returned to being cold and objective, focused only on business. May 12, 1997. Today I went to the Rising Sun Orphanage. I always visit the place and help however I can. These children are the future. You can't just leave them to their own fate. One of them struck me especially today. Milena, small, fragile, with big, sad eyes. She has a growth problem. Doctors say the chances of recovery are minimal. But I don't believe that. I am sure I can help her. I spoke with the director of the institution and offered to pay for the treatment. He accepted. I hope this helps Milena grow and have a better life. Milena froze as if she had been struck by lightning. It was her name? So Alvaro Castro was the mysterious benefactor of her childhood. It was he who funded the treatment that helped her overcome her condition. With a racing heart she continued, reading without being able to take her eyes off the screen. December 22, 1997. Today I heard that Milena is better. The treatment is working. She started growing. She is more active and full of life. I am so happy. In a way, I feel a bit like a father to this girl. I want her to have a bright future. Also, a wonderful family intends to adopt her. So be it. I will remain at a distance like a guardian angel. August 15, 2009. Milena entered university, Mahiona. She wants to be a music teacher. Her dream is to bring joy to children. I hope she succeeds. I will follow her steps from afar. 2012. Yesterday, by chance, I saw Milena on the street. She is an adult, beautiful, intelligent, talented. Of course, she didn't recognize me. I've changed a lot since then, but I recognized her right away. My little girl grew up and became an incredible woman. I am so proud of her. Milena couldn't hold back her tears. Her whole life, believed her recovery was a matter of chance. She never knew who had truly helped her. Now, finally, the truth was before her eyes. She had always believed her treatment was funded by some faceless fund or anonymous sponsor, but now she discovered that throughout her life there had been a real man tracking her path, Alvaro Castro, a man she never met, but who changed her destiny forever. And for some reason, he never said anything about it. Maybe for him it was enough just to know she was well. Milena kept reading, trying to find more answers. She turned several pages of the diary until she found a new note, one that made her heart tighten. March 7, 2018. Today I learned that Milena married that Icaro Antunes fellow. They say he's a promising manager, a man with a future. I hope he loves her and takes care of her. She deserves to be happy. Milena felt a lump form in her throat because Alvaro called her my girl. And yet, this simply couldn't be true. Consumed by an inexplicable restlessness, she kept reading. The next entry had a new date. Recently, I learned that Milena went through a tragedy. She lost the baby, and it was Icaro's fault. He lost control of the boat. I am furious with him. How could he do that to my girl? Milena has already suffered so much in life, and now he hurts her even more. I want to talk to him, make him understand that he must value her, protect her. She is the most precious thing he has. For Milena is my daughter, with my former fiancée Laura, who died 2 days after childbirth. I was abroad. I will never forgive myself for that. Milena doesn't need to know the truth. What kind of father am I? I couldn't save her mother, and I spent all these years away without her knowing who I was. Tears streamed down Milena's face. The pain she felt was unbearable. The text on the screen blurred before her eyes. Now, everything made sense. All this time, her real father had been nearby, watching, from the shadows. And Laura, mentioned by Alvaro in his diary, was her mother, who died giving birth to her. The last entry in the diary was from 2 months ago, shortly before the accident that left Alvaro in a coma. I am about to confront him, but I will say nothing, Milena. This is my truth, and no one else's. Before anything else, I want him to tell me the truth about his business. He and his father are plotting something behind my back. I helped him, gave him a future, and now he and Horacio have stolen my money while smiling to my face. I shouldn't have named him head of the sales department. I hope Icaro knows how to handle criticism and makes the right choice. I know he has a mistress, actually several, meh. I need to make this clear to him in a subtle way. Either he divorces Milena, or starts acting like a real man. I hope he doesn't know I have proof against him, but, just in case, I'll hide everything in the country house safe. And so ended the businessman's digital diary, who was now confined to a hospital bed in a coma. No one knew when Alvaro Castro would wake up, or if he ever would. In fact, to many, the accident that landed him in the ICU was suspicious. He had always been a cautious driver. So, how could he have swerved into oncoming traffic and collided with the truck? Holding back tears, Milena closed the digital diary and leaned back in her chair. Chaos dominated her mind. It was too much information all at once. She wasn't a detective. She was just a music teacher. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed a piece of paper and began writing the names of everyone involved in pencil. After half an hour of sketching arrows and organizing events, Milena reached a terrifying conclusion. Icaro somehow found out that Alvaro Castro had evidence against him and seemed to have decided to eliminate him with an accident. But when the compromising documents weren't found, he hired Tadeu to ransack the businessman's property in search of the hiding spot. However, Nicola the neighbor disrupted the plans. The neighbors scared off the intruders before they could finish their search. Unable to find the evidence he wanted, Icaro made a radical decision. He filed for divorce and sent Milena to his boss's country house, hoping she would stay out of the way. If Alvaro never woke up from his coma, the secrets he held would die with him. And Tadeu, he probably fell for it out of naivete. He believed Icaro's promises and agreed to meet him at the cemetery, but nearly ended up dead. Milena knew her theory could be wrong. What if things weren't as they seemed? What if Icaro and Horacio were together in this dark scheme, conducting illicit business behind Alvaro's back? Suddenly, Milena realized what she needed to do. She had to go to the police, the hideout, the attack on Tadeu, Alvaro Castro's diary, machen. Everything was part of a single mystery. And now, the key to uncovering the truth was in her hands. Milena went to the local police station when At first, they didn't take her seriously. But when she mentioned the attack on Tadeu, the hideout, and her father's diary, the investigator became immediately interested. She told them everything she knew, detailing every circumstance. Investigator Orlando listened carefully, occasionally asking questions. Are you saying your ex-husband might be involved in the attempted murder of Alvaro Castro? The officer asked, frowning. I'm not stating it as a fact, but everything points to it, Milena replied, hesitant. I think Icaro needs to be investigated. The investigator decided to act immediately, went to the hospital, where Alvaro was admitted, and that was where the truth came to light. Upon arriving, they found Icaro inside the businessman's room holding a syringe in his hands. He was arrested in the act, and security around Alvaro Castro's room was immediately reinforced. The following days went by in a blur. Milena never left her father's side, listening to every breath, attentive to the monotonous sound of the machines. And then, finally, Alvaro Castro opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Milena's face. Dad, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Alvaro's eyes brightened, and a weak smile appeared on his face. "Daughter, I am so happy you are here," he replied, moved aid. "Forgive me for not telling you sooner. I was afraid to look into your eyes." Later, fully recovered from the coma, Alvaro told her everything. He spoke about his love for Laura, about how he secretly helped Milena at the orphanage, and how, after her mother's death, he never stopped watching over her from afar, lacking the courage to reveal the truth. Milena listened in silence, while tears streamed down her face. Then, she finally hugged him and, for the first time in many years, felt truly happy. Icaro was arrested and tried along with his father, Horacio. After all, they were the ones responsible for Alvaro's accident and the attempted murder of Taddeo. The criminal duo was charged with double attempted murder and embezzlement from the company's accounts. Deep down, Milena was still shocked. How could someone she once loved be so cruel and greedy? But life moved on. Little by little, things began to improve. She started visiting her father every day, helping with his recovery. Father and daughter spent hours together, trying to make up for lost time. Even with the new routine, Milena did not forget about Aurora and her father, Taddeo. Fortunately, his injury wasn't serious and the fisherman soon began to recover. During this time, he insisted on telling the whole truth to Milena and Alvaro Castro. He admitted that Amando de Icaro had searched the cottage grounds for the hiding place. But Alvaro forgave him without hesitation. He knew that everyone has the right to make mistakes. The important thing was to learn from them. As for Aurora, she became like a daughter to Milena. The two started doing everything together. They walked by the river, read stories, and played outdoors. Months passed, months that changed everyone's lives forever. On a warm summer night, Tayo invited Milena for a walk by the lake in the forest. While they talked, Aurora ran around trying to catch butterflies. That was when Taddeo stopped, looked into her eyes and said, "Milena, I know this might not be the right time after everything that happened, but I can no longer hide how I feel. You have become the most important person to me and to Aurora. You saved us. Milena, will you marry me?" She was surprised. She hadn't expected that, but when she looked into his eyes, full of love and hope, she realized she had found her happiness. "Yes," she replied, smiling. "I will." Aurora let out a shout of joy and ran to hug them. Shortly after, they celebrated the wedding with a big party. Alvaro Castro, now quite recovered, walked with Milena to the altar. Beside them was Taddeo, radiant with happiness and holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Aurora smiled with emotion. Milena found her happiness in that quiet village, Thanks to specialized treatment on the coast, she managed to get rid of the headaches and hearing loss that had tormented her so much in the past. She went back to teaching music at the local school, dedicating herself heart and soul to teaching, and her house was always filled with music. At night, the family would gather around the table, sharing stories and drinking tea with honey brought by their neighbor Nicolas, the beekeeper. That was how Milena rebuilt her life, surrounded by love, peace, and happiness. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to show your support with a like. It is very important to me. A big hug, and I'll see you in the next story.